Welcome to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Davis. It's a very special one-year anniversary edition of the podcast. We take a moment to recap what this year has been for the podcast and the wrestling world. WWE has thrown away the 24/7 championship, but should the Money in the Bank briefcase go next? Plus, how the looming MJF world title reign should go down. This and so much more on this special one-year edition of the Mic the Drop Wrestling Podcast. Welcome to a very special edition of the podcast. It's our 1-year anniversary since we've been on Spotify. A little under the weather today, so I got a handy dandy water at my disposal. And let's get down to it. Before we recap what this year has been to us, thank you so much for being a part of the show. If you are listening live on Facebook or YouTube right now, and you want to be a part of this special 1-year anniversary edition of the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast, send in your questions on Facebook. Send in your questions on YouTube. They'll pop up on the screen as advertised, and we'll get to talk about it. But to begin this podcast today, I wanted to talk about what happened on Monday Night Raw. Obviously, this is a Mic Drop Monday, so we go probably usually an hour or two before Monday Night Raw airs. We look forward to what happens on that show and the rest of the week later on. And unfortunately, WWE made a direction that felt awkward. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Austin Theory was the first ever person to cash in on the United States Championship, the first one to ever not cash in on a world title. And not only that, he lost to Seth Rollins on Monday Night Raw, losing the Money in the Bank briefcase in the process in what I know as an open challenge. I mean, there's so much we have to dive into to start out this week's podcast. Best question I have is why? Why? Like, if you've realized since Triple H has taken over creative, Vince McMahon retired, this was Vince's golden boy. Austin Theory was beating people left and right. He won the Money in the Bank briefcase, the youngest Money in the Bank in history, and it looked like he was on the right trajectory to be a big-time star. Drew a lot of comparisons to John Cena early on. And then ever since the creative switch, which I am not opposed to, I really love what Triple H has done for the most part in his tenure as the chief content officer in WWE, except for Monday, where Austin Theory cashed in on the United States Championship. Now, I get it. Roman Reigns is not losing this world championship anytime soon. People have tried to figure out a way to give Austin Theory a title without diminishing the reign of the tribal chief, which I honestly believe it took a little knockdown with that Logan Paul match, having Logan Paul hang with him at Crown Jewel a couple weeks ago. But Roman Reigns is carrying these world titles, and it's not going to be Austin Theory who brings them down. That's not going to happen. So for Austin Theory to cash in on the United States Championship, it's like, okay, you're going to have him cash in, and it's not on the world title, so he actually will win this, and you give him a direction. Well, now he's lost, so was there even a point in him cashing in on the United States title? Because this Money in the Bank briefcase has so much prestige behind it. Okay, you go back to its original match back at WrestleMania 21, the first time WrestleMania went Hollywood, Edge, the Rated R superstar, won the Money in the Bank briefcase. And guess what that did for his career? It launched it into a whole other atmosphere. It gave him that main event status right away. Following year, Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam carries that title, takes it to ECW One Night Stand, beats John Cena for the WWE Championship, and then launches the ECW brand. The following year, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy gets hurt. 2007, He doesn't cash it in. Instead, Edge wins it off of Mr. Kennedy and becomes world heavyweight champion, somebody who the SmackDown brand relied on. We have seen this briefcase done so much for so many people. And we've had our failed Money in the Bank cash-ins. You knew when the stipulation happened, it was going to come eventually. You know, the likes of John Cena, Braun Strowman, Baron Corbin, all those have lost their cash-in opportunities, but they went for the world title. And that was the entire stipulation of the Money in the Bank briefcase, being guaranteed a world title opportunity at any time, any place, anywhere that your heart desires. Well, this Monday on Raw, that stipulation was thrown in the trash very disrespectfully of Money in the Bank and what it has done for so many careers in the past. And I'm furious. I'm infuriated because it doesn't make sense. Like, I understand Triple H has his guys that he's going to push, and I'm a fan. You know, we've seen AJ Styles, we've seen Finn Balor used more regularly on TV. We've seen Kevin Owens, we've seen Elias get his character back. We've seen Vince guys like Veer. He's went back down to NXT. He's nowhere to be seen on the main roster. And I didn't expect Theory to be the next big thing once Triple H took over creative right away. But this is so much bigger than Austin Theory. This is so much bigger than him. You have ruined one of the biggest stipulations, one of the biggest matches in WWE today. Okay? You have WrestleMania, the grand day of them all. You have SummerSlam, you have Survivor Series, you have the Royal Rumble. And in recent years, Money in the Bank has been a more historic event than Survivor Series itself. A lot of people consider that Survivor Series might not even be in the Big Four. It might be the Money in the Bank. Now, I don't know if they'll keep Money in the Bank as a standalone pay-per-view event, if they'll put it back on WrestleMania, if they'll put it back on SummerSlam, but the damage is done right now. The damage is done. We've seen, and I understand, like, it debuted in 2005. We're 17, 18 years into this. So you're going to have to come up with crazy creative moments to come up with. But for Austin Theory to cash in on the United States title, a mid-card title, exactly, Isaiah, it's crazy. I don't even know this first craziest cash in ever. Like, this is so disrespectful to everyone who has held the Money in the Bank briefcase in its history. There's no reason. It's unacceptable. And after seeing WWE throw away the 24/7 championship on the same night as they did away with Austin Theory's run as Mr. Money in the Bank, it's got me thinking, is it time to retire Money in the Bank, or at least let it go away for a couple years? Because I feel like Monday, this tarnished the entire Money in the Bank legacy, unfortunately, because this is a fun concept. You know, this launched so many careers. This became its own thing. It started at WrestleMania. Just, you know, Chris Jericho, Edge have talked about the story ongoing. Edge didn't originally want to be a part of the Money in the Bank ladder match, and lo and behold, it started his career as a main event and as the guy in WWE, as WWE champion, as world heavyweight champion. And they didn't want to fight for just nothing or fight for the Intercontinental Championship. They wanted to fight for something legitimate. And they're like, hey, let's put a world title match up anytime in the next 12 months. And there was reports that Theory might even hold the briefcase for an entire year and have a countdown clock, kind of like what we started the broadcast with, to try to figure out, you know, when he's going to cash in on the 1-year anniversary of him winning Money in the Bank. And now, what do you do? It, like, I don't know how you can recover the Money in the Bank. And part of me is like, let's just go back to the basics. Theory's lost the Money in the Bank briefcase. You don't really have a challenger lined up for Roman Reigns right now with the world title. You know he's going to hold it until WrestleMania when he faces The Rock in a legendary dream match. You don't know what's going to happen after that. I feel like Roman needs to hold the title until SummerSlam of next year. You could potentially have the match return to WrestleMania. Triple H is doing away with a lot of gimmicky premium live events, talking about getting rid of the Hell in a Cell premium live event and only using it for those big blood feuds that they have, just like they did at Crown Jewel, Saudi Arabia last couple of years. You could bring this Money in the Bank ladder match back to WrestleMania. There's always 6, 7, 8 guys who are just about to break through. You can add a veteran or two in there. You can add somebody who's already been world champion, who knows ladder matches and can help construct the match itself. But you have to be kidding me. This is one of the worst decisions in WWE all year. And that's saying something, because Vince McMahon, before he left, was on his rocking horse. Let's be honest. You can only cash this briefcase in on the world champion, and Austin Theory didn't even win. Austin Theory lost a cash in on a mid-card champion. So why not just have him get cash in on Roman Reigns at a premium live event after he's gone through a match like War Games at Survivor Series? Why not have Austin Theory try to cash in on Roman, the Bloodline try to do something to where they protect Roman's reign, his tribal chief, his head of the table spot? Instead, WWE, you have disappointed me this week with Austin Theory. And again, no disrespect to Triple H. This is one of the very few gaffes in creative logic that he's had ever since coming in the summer. He's done a really great job. On the same night, he got rid of the 24/7 title, which I can approve of. I don't say I hate the 24/7 title. I don't say I love it, but it's done. It's dead. Let's move on. And the same night, he brought back Mia Yim to join the OC. That's cool. I'm on board. I'm on board with Mia Yim join the OC for this little feud with Judgment Day. It'll be interesting to see if they make a traditional Survivor Series match or if they just put these in War Games and say go on. But Triple H, this was a gaffe on your part, and hopefully we don't get a gaffe in AEW when Full Gear happens this Saturday, this weekend. We're going to break down the entire Full Gear event later on this weekend, perhaps Friday or Saturday night, depending on when a few guests could be appearing. That would be awesome. But before I find that out, we're going to talk a little bit about making sure the impending title run for Maxwell Jacob Friedman, MJF, is not a gaffe like this one. We're going to talk about that next when we come back after the break. Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, Michael Davis, and as I mentioned, we will have the Full Gear preview later on this weekend. We'll break down the entire card, lining up some guests to talk about that. But I did want to mention a couple things about the AEW Full Gear card. And first things first, Maxwell Jacob Friedman versus Jon Moxley for the world title. And these two had a very similar match, I believe, in 2020 during the pandemic. May have even been 2019. It was actually 2020. It was during the pandemic, and they didn't have any fans. Moxley retained the title against MJF, and now they ran full circle. Jon Moxley is the AEW World Champion again after extenuating circumstances with CM Punk. CM Punk also just made his first on-air appearance since the All Out Media Scrum, not for AEW, but commentating a boxing match. And Bobby Fish is now into boxing, apparently. But aside from that, Jon Moxley canceled his vacation to win the AEW World title for a third time, a record in the company. And it just seems like it's set up to have MJF become the AEW World Champion for the first time in his career. I believe the trajectory of this was supposed to be CM Punk versus MJF for the world title at Full Gear. Things didn't work out that way. CM Punk gets hurt, and on the same night, he basically runs himself out of the company. And I remember coming on this show is like, I don't know if this is a work to protect CM Punk's legacy with the injury, but I thought it was a work the entire time where MJF cut the pipe bomb like promo. You knew he was coming back. You just didn't know a matter of when, but they blurred the line so well. I don't think that's the case in this instance, where I believe CM Punk is fully, completely done and has ruined his legacy. You can listen more about that opinion on last week's episode that's available on YouTube and Spotify. But MJF should and likely will win the world title for the first time in his career, and at a young age. And it just amazes me how young he is. At a young age of 26 years old, 5'11", he is about to have this company on his back. And if there's any person under the age of 30 I would entrust my brand on his back, it's going to be MJF. It's going to be the guy who can get on the microphone, make you love him, make you hate him. He can do it all. And MJF is likely going to win the world title. Now, we don't do this often because I love seeing how things play out. I love just sitting back and watching WWE Weekly, Raw, SmackDown, NXT. Just love watching it run down. AEW, same thing. I feel like Triple H and Tony Khan, we've seen from 3 years how well he can book things and stories as they progress. Triple H has had a good track record other than last Monday with the cash-in. So I don't usually go with the how would I book it kind of ordeal. But to have fun, this is how I would book it. I was going to a Duke basketball game with my dad last week, and I was like, this actually might have legs. So I've said for weeks, ever since MJF said he wouldn't be using the Dynamite Diamond ring to win his match against Jon Moxley, I've said for weeks, okay, that's perfect. He's going to get William Regal's brass knuckles and use it, hit Jon Moxley, and win it. And that's perfect. That's how you should do it. There's no other result that you could pull that would get more heat from that, especially after saying he wouldn't use the Dynamite Diamond ring. He's going to use the brass knuckles. And Full Gear is now. This is about 13, 14 months before the apparent contract of MJF runs out in January 2024. And MJF has taken to the mic for the last year saying that there's a bidding war of 2024. And MJF's contract's ending. He's threatening to go to WWE and leave AEW. That instantly draws heat. I don't think he'll actually do it. I feel like there is a childhood dream of that, but I don't think he actually goes to WWE. But who knows? Cody Rhodes did, so that opened the possibility of it actually happening. And Triple H is in control of creative rather than Vince McMahon, also helps. But MJF wins the world title at Full Gear this weekend, and he's going to hold it for a year. This is how I book it. He holds the title for a year. And as you get closer to Full Gear of 2023, a year from now, MJF starts threatening, my contract ends in January 2024, and I'm not resigning, and nobody's taking this world championship from me. Therefore, what I will do is I am going to take the AEW World Championship to Connecticut, to WWE, and leave AEW without a world champion. CM Punk did pretty much the same thing back in 2011. So 11 years ago, it'll be 12 years ago when the time he's threatening this. MJF threatens to take the world title away from the company to go to WWE and draw instant heat. And then we kind of see Tony Khan's like, okay, we need to throw some challengers at him. Full Gear comes by a year from now, and MJF successfully defends the Full Gear title, and now only a month and a half remains of his contract in AEW. And for a guy who doesn't usually wrestle on a week-to-week basis, Tony Khan lines up challengers to get the world title off of MJF and to keep it in the company. And then you can go several different directions. You could have so many dream matches. You could have MJF then lose it at Winter is Coming next year. So he'd have hold the title for a year and he loses it right before his contract expires. You could also have his contract expire with the title and figure out some Tony Khan negotiations to get MJF back in AEW. All of that works, which means we are about to see Tony Khan. I pray you just listen to that, because we're about to see one of the best world title runs in the ring, but most importantly on the mic and story-wise that we have seen in AEW's history. And things might look up for a division that has struggled in AEW, and that's the women's division. This past week on Dynamite, Saraya and Dr. Britt Baker were face-to-face in the ring, where Saraya confirmed and broke the news that she had been cleared. I figured once she had signed with AEW, there's no way she signs without being cleared. So this was pretty much just a formality in the story, in the saga of like, okay, now she is cleared. She is going to compete in a dream match against Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, of Brittsburg, Pennsylvania. And this signing and this return by no means improves the women's division itself, okay? Saraya has been on record of saying she's not going to work a full load. We're not going to see a CM Punk level of return where CM Punk was competing week in and week out. Maybe that's what broke CM Punk. Who knows? But this does have the potential to improve storylines and improve name recognition. So if you remember when AEW started in 2019, they had Jon Moxley, they had Chris Jericho, they had these bigger names. They had Cody Rhodes. You bring over from Japan, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. But the main names were Cody Rhodes, Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley. That's what you're building your brand off of, mixed in with some talent that you found and you've discovered, mixed in with some people who were mid-carders in WWE. That's how you're building your brand, right? If you look at the women's division, there wasn't a lot. There was Awesome Kong. Your biggest women's wrestler was Riho, Nyla Rose, and those aren't putting butts in seats. Sorry. You just don't have any names. If you're a wrestling fan, you're talking to somebody why they should watch AEW, you can bring up Jericho, you can bring up Rhodes, you can bring up anyone. You can bring up Moxley. Hey, you remember that Dean Ambrose guy? You're not bringing up any woman in AEW, because even Dr. Britt Baker doesn't have full name recognition with just a casual wrestling fan or a casual fan of entertainment. But you bring up Saraya. You bring Paige, formerly known as Paige in WWE, and she was good. When she was in her prime, she was good. And this could be what Jericho was for AEW now, because now you have the name recognition. Now you're going to have Saraya versus Dr. Britt Baker. People are wanting to tune in for Saraya's improbable in-ring return against Dr. Britt Baker this weekend at Full Gear. this is the breakthrough moment for AEW. If you genuinely want your women's division to improve, you need names. I feel like AEW's missed a window to get Sasha Banks. If Sasha's not under contract with WWE right now, I feel like Triple H coming back kind of ruins that a little bit. But you have Saraya right now, and WWE tried signing her, but Saraya ended up choosing AEW, and that could be a big thing for AEW moving forward. But that's all to come this weekend. We'll also have a live stream, me, a guest or two or three. Who knows what the list is going to come out as. Will join me Friday or Saturday afternoon, even to discuss the Full Gear pay-per-view in full gear. But now we're going to switch gears after the break. We're going to talk about, obviously, the Rosebud Thorn, the most beloved segment of y'all and fellow loyal listeners of the show. And we're also going to talk about the 1-year anniversary of the Drop the Mic Wrestling podcast that coming next on the Drop the Mic Wrestling podcast, live on Facebook, live on YouTube. You can send in questions, but we'll catch you after the break. Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling podcast. I'm your host, Michael Davis, and this is a really special day for your Mic Drop Monday, and it happens to be the 1-year anniversary of the Drop the Mic Wrestling podcast, and just want to take a big shout out to all the loyal listeners. I can't begin to list them all, Chase Parks, Isaiah, Hunter, my grandmother, my mom, who some of these people don't even like wrestling, don't even follow on a weekly basis. And I know it's just the start. And, kind of looking back to where it all started, I remember I wanted to talk wrestling because last year, once Punk and Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole joined AEW, I'm like, okay, we have a second tier wrestling company that's enjoyable. This wrestling business is about to boom because WWE doesn't play second fiddle. I knew that. And going into that, it was like, okay, I don't have a professional microphone. I don't have this. I don't have that. And I work at summer camp, and during the conference, the fall and the spring, I meet so many different people. And there was this one guest who I was talking to about my dreams, everything. And she essentially said, just do it. Just do it. Just put stuff out there. And I'm like, it's going to sound really bad. And people go back and listen to that first episode. The audio quality is horrible. Absolutely horrible. I'm stumbling over my words. And, that's how it started. Was really jank audio on Spotify on Fridays because that was the day that, worked best. And then that worked into getting better audio equipment. At that time, I was appearing on The Score with Brett Wiseman on Tobacco Road Sports Radio and ended up guest hosting a show for Brett and get a call from the producer saying, hey, I would love for you to have your own radio show affiliated with Tobacco Road Sports Radio. And I was like, absolutely. And then that show airs on the Friday time slot. It's now Fridays at 5 as part of the TGI Friday lineup, talking football, basketball, even talking wrestling, making appearances on the Rundown with Desmond Johnson for Tobacco Road Sports Radio, talking wrestling, talking football, talking basketball. And with all that stuff, Friday and Saturday pretty loaded broadcasting wise. I moved this to Mondays. There gets the Mic Drop Mondays. And ever since, it feels like everything is moving really quickly. Graphics, logos, best friend Caleb Watson helping out with those, building a social media presence, starting a YouTube channel, starting to go live on Facebook Live so you guys can be a part of the show. That was a driving force for me, and still making connections all over the place. We had Sato for Clash at the Castle. He was a part of our Facebook and YouTube Live, our very first Facebook and YouTube Live of this new era, talking everything that we needed to know about Crown or Clash at the Castle. And, what's next for the podcast is more to come, continuing to grow its social media connections, continuing to grow its social media presence. And can't do this without any of you. So, everyone, thank you, thank you, thank you, because I'm having the time of my life right now. I'm still working at camp. I'm still doing the podcast, even have a shirt made. Yeah, that's my face for our video watchers. That is my face on a t-shirt, which is really cool. And it's going to be amazing to look back where we are from a year from now. Because if you asked me, and this is what I really want to stick, is if you asked me last year at this time, where do you see this going? I'm like, I may lose motivation. I may get an episode or two in and see it's too hard, or give up, or nobody will watch. And that's not true, because in just a year, a small community's built. And in the next year, who knows where this podcast will be. I never imagined my own radio show, particularly this early on. And this is really cool. This is a really great time. You can continue to follow the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, and Instagram. But what we get now is our beloved segment of everyone, our Rose, Bud, and Thorn. Our Rose, I'm going to jump right into it. Bryan Danielson versus Sammy Guevara was nasty. You could tell by Bryan Danielson. I'm a sucker for this. Like, I believe this is why I love Sheamus and Gunther's matches, particularly at Clash of the Castle, so much, is you look at them 15 minutes in, and you can tell they have beat each other to death. And I was expecting Danielson to beat Guevara to death, and ended up being the exact opposite. Even though Danielson won the match, it was Danielson's face looks awful. He's bleeding. He's busted open. You can see welts, bruises all over his eye, all over his face. Really helped establish Guevara going into their fatal four-way at Full Gear, going into their tag match this Wednesday on Dynamite. My Thorn, obviously Austin Theory's cash in. It might genuinely be the worst moment in wrestling this year. And I saw Stone Cold Steve Austin stone cold stun a 76-year-old man named Vince McMahon at WrestleMania and try to sell it off as one of the greatest things. I've seen pretty bad stuff this year, but Theory cashing in and losing on the United States title tops the cake. And that might be the thorn of the entire year. But we'll probably do a year end of Rose, Thorn, and Bud. But my Bud, obviously Saraya's in-ring return. There's a lot of buzz around that. Not as much as CM Punk, but for her to come back to the ring is just a miracle in itself. And I'm really excited for it. And speaking of excitement, we have Dynamite this Wednesday. We have Jon Moxley and MJF speaking. I don't know if they'll speak against each other or they'll speak at two different times in the show, but they can do so much on the microphone. They cut two really good promos this past week, and Jon Moxley challenging MJF, saying, "You're not the devil. You're not the devil. I've met him, and you're not him." Anytime they have the microphone, you can tell me nothing else happens on the show, and I'm tournament. And I'm not an Ethan Page fan. I'm really rooting for Bandito in this one. But after the Firm and MJF had their falling out, it genuinely appears that Ethan Page and MJF are going to challenge, and that'll be the first match of MJF's title run. We have that tag match I mentioned, Claudio and Bryan Danielson versus Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara. Sammy Guevara probably takes the L in this tag match. Claudio Danielson gets momentum, head into the weekend. But I still feel like if you're trying to get ROH a TV deal, Chris Jericho needs to remain the champion. Bryan Danielson also has that presence. Claudio, I wouldn't pick as a bad champion for ROH at the start of its new era, but I'm still picking Jericho to win this weekend. We'll get to talk about that a lot more this weekend for a special Facebook and YouTube live preview with a couple guests. We're not going to put that one on Spotify. So it will only be exclusive to Facebook and YouTube. And then, of course, Death Triangle defend the World Trios against Top Flight. Top Flight's return and AR Fox. AR Fox has paid his dues in the Indies. Great for him. It's going to be a fun trios match, but Death Triangle isn't losing that one. You have NXT, you have a couple title matches. You have Braun Breaker defend the title against Von Wagner. I'm not a fan of Von Wagner. I feel like he needs time to develop. I feel like Braun Breaker probably retains his title if I had to guess. I don't see him losing it on a random NXT show, especially to Von Wagner. Then you have JD McDonough and Apollo Crews breathing down Braun Breaker's neck, including Grayson Waller. So I could totally see a 5-6-man match where Braun Breaker's against all odds. And not sure who wins that JD McDonough Apollo Crews match. My money's on McDonough, but I could lose money on that. And here's the tricky one. Mandy Rose defending the NXT women's title against Alba Fire. I feel like Mandy Rose retains, but I feel like Alba Fire, if there's anyone who's going to win the title right now for Mandy, it's going to be her. And God, you're okay right now with Raw and SmackDown, but I feel like Toxic Attraction just needs to start making its way to the main roster. You can build that for the next 4 or 5 months before they debut after WrestleMania even. But if it's not Alba Fire, then who is it? And, we mentioned the AEW World Title Tournament earlier. We got a SmackDown World Cup Tournament. And this Friday on SmackDown, you got Ricochet versus Ali in that tournament. I'm betting on Ricochet, especially since Mustafa Ali's pretty much on Monday Night Raw. Ricochet probably wins that. Bobby Lashley probably even gets involved to cost Mustafa Ali that chance. You have Sami Zayn versus Butch. This confuses me a little bit because even though Sami Zayn is in a heel group with the Bloodline, Sami Zayn is beloved by fans. Butch is beloved by fans. And if they try to pull off Sami as a heel, not sure how that works. I could see Sami just losing this to lose this and Butch go ahead and win. And, Jey Uso probably even cost him the match. Who knows? Braun Strowman, Santos Escobar still waiting their opponents as the SmackDown World Cup tournament continues. But tonight on Raw, we have a couple things. I don't know what's next with Judgment Day and OC, but with Mia Yim's return to WWE last week, it looks like they've begun to even the odds. They still have Damian, Finn, Dominic, Rhea, and then you turn around, you have AJ Styles, Gallows, Anderson, and Mia Yim as 4v4. I don't know if they're going to do a War Games match, like an intergender War Games match. I don't know if they're going to do a traditional Survivor Series match. I don't know what they do for Survivor Series, but it goes to show this has been one of the more entertaining things WWE has had with those two trios groups. You have Matt Riddle versus Chad Gable tonight. It was originally going to be Riddle and Elias versus Alpha Academy. They brought it down to a singles match. Riddle probably gets a win over Gable. And you have Miz TV. This, I'm going to give this props, okay? The Miz, Dexter Lumis, Johnny Gargano, this has been compelling TV. And it's different. And this is one of the first stories that Triple H brought on TV. I don't know if he knew the direction at the beginning, but it already got your attention. And for all the twists and turns in this story and it doesn't even feel like they have a solid plan, but they put on something to continue to progress to the next week. And the Miz hosts Miz TV to address the Dexter Lumis situation. And I'm sure what this turns into, maybe we get Dexter Lumis versus the Miz at Survivor Series. I feel like Survivor Series is a good payoff for this. And unfortunately, speaking of the United States title, that's been a hot topic on this show. Seth Rollins defends the title against Finn Balor. I feel like the OC costs Finn Balor this opportunity, setting up something for Survivor Series. But wow, I still can't get over Austin Theory cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase on the United States Championship and losing. So who knows what's next for the United States title? Bobby Lashley, Mustafa Ali. I don't know if Austin Theory's thrown back in there. I feel like not only the Money in the Bank briefcase, but Austin Theory was damaged last week and not sure where to go from here. And speaking of, not sure where else to touch on for the rest of the show. So we're going to get out of here. We got Monday Night Raw starting at 8. And you can always send this to somebody on Facebook, on YouTube. We're there on Spotify. And thank you guys so much for supporting the podcast for a year. You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram at Drop the Mic Wrestling. Share it with your friends. We're getting a lot of social media presence out now, and we couldn't do it without any of you. But until next week, this has been another edition, a 1-year anniversary edition of a Mic Drop Monday. We will see you next week. Hey, and we'll see you this weekend for the AEW Full Gear preview on Facebook and YouTube exclusively. Stay tuned for more after everything. Guys, have a great week.